Let's start with the race that you are in the middle of. What are the issues as you go around a campaign? What are the issues you hear about first and foremost from your constituents?
Well, first of all, border security down here at the border is important. And that's why I've been very strong supporting Border Patrol, ICE, and everybody that secures our border. Because, we believe in immigration reform. We believe in treating the migrants with dignity and respect. But at the end of the day, we got to make sure that we enforce the law. And that's one of the things I've been doing as the vice chair of the Homeland Security Committee. But, you got other very basic issues. I run as a congressman, but I also run as a mayor in the sense that there's a lot of basic needs. Healthcare, that's so important. Infrastructure, and that's why the historic infrastructure bill that provided Texas over $26 billion is so important. So this is the way I run. I'm a congressman, but I run as a mayor addressing the local issues.
But you also run as a Democrat. And does being a Democrat right now help you on the issue of immigration? Because there are a lot of Republicans who accuse the Democrats of really being somewhat lax on the border security that I know that you have really advocated.
I think I've insulated myself from those attacks because over the years, I've been very strong on border security. And again, look, my father, my mom's family came from Guerrero, Tamaulipas. They became a legal resident. And then my father became a naturalized citizen. They followed the process. And right now, there's a lot of, and I got a Hispanic district. There's a lot of folks here that follow that process. And when they see people jump in the line, they don't like that. And this is why, if I can use that word, I've insulated myself. I've taken the position that really reflects of what happens down here on the border. If you look at it, I don't have a single public official or a city that's asking for open borders. I don't have one single one. And that's important to know because for us to live on the border, we want to make sure that we treat people with respect and dignity. But at the end of the day, we don't want chaos. We want law and order. And that's what we are advocating down here.
So, Mr. Representative, I'm curious about inflation. Is inflation a big issue for you down there?
It is, but one of the things I've done, I've supported the oil and gas industry. In fact, there's 40,000 good paying jobs here. I've been keeping an eye on oil and gas, and it's been going down. And the reason I believe that if you bring down the prices of gasoline, and I'd rather have domestic drilling, create jobs here, bring revenues here, instead of asking Saudi Arabia or somebody else for that oil. We need to drill here because jobs will be created. And if you bring down the prices of gasoline, we know that whether it's fertilizer for food prices, that will go down. Transportation, that will go down as long as we keep diesel and gasoline prices. And that's why I've been a big believer of supporting the oil and gas industry.
Congressman Cuellar, I'm very curious. You mentioned you have an Hispanic district, and it's been perceived over time that Hispanics tend to vote with Democrats. But here on two issues you've raised, immigration and more drilling for oil and gas, that hasn't necessarily been the national Democratic point of view. Are the Republicans making inroads with the Hispanic population down where you are?
Well, first of all, let me address the first part of your statement or question. I think the national Democrats need to understand that we here at the border, we see things very differently. We cannot nationalize the message because here at the border, it's very different. And I know this because, look, after the election in 2020, Trump did do better in a lot of the counties that I represent in South Texas. He only won by 20 points. That is in the southern part. And I went right afterwards, about 2 days after the election, asking people, why did Trump do well? And there were two issues. One was the oil and gas, because if you take jobs away from those good paying jobs, people are not going to like that. And the other one was this open border type of situation, making sure that we support law enforcement. And those were the two issues. And this is what I've been running at. In fact, if you look at my primary, I spent millions of dollars on those two issues. And it was a primary against a very progressive person. And I talked about oil and gas, supporting oil and gas, supporting law enforcement, no defunding the police, but supporting law enforcement, border security. And I ran on that. And I got in a lot of those southern counties, I got about 80% of the vote. So those are Hispanics. Now, talking about Hispanics. Was there a political realignment in 2020? My answer is no. There was not a political realignment. But does redistricting have an impact? I think it'll have an impact, redistricting. But I really feel that Hispanics are not monolithic. And we got, as Democrats, we got to talk to them and work with them and make sure that we understand the issues that work on it, that are important to them. And the national issues, without due respect, it doesn't resonate very well down here. And this is why I always said I'm a congressman. But I come back here and run as a mayor and look at the local issues, and border security and oil and gas are those issues.
Well, one last one, if I could, Congressman Cuellar, and that is, as you look at this election coming up, do you think that your constituents are giving the Democratic Party the credit that certainly President Biden claims for improving the employment situation? I think we forget where we were in employment 2 years ago. And what we hear from the White House in response to the inflation question is, yeah, but we've given you a lot of jobs. Do the Democrats get credit for that in your district?
No, I think Democrats need to do a better job talking about the unemployment. I mean, if you look at it, we're under 4%. Texas, just here in Texas for the last 15 months has been the leading state in private job creations. And one of the things we need to do as Democrats is, Democrats tend to talk about certain issues that are important, but you got to go back to the basics. And the economics is one of them. And that's why I talk about oil and gas jobs, because those are jobs down here. Unemployment, anytime I see the unemployment rate go down, I tweet it, I talk about that. When I see gasoline prices at $2.99 or even lower, I talk about that. And we as Democrats, we need to talk about, the jobs that are created by small businesses. We need to talk about, what it means to have a job, because Hispanics, we don't want any handouts. What we want as Hispanics is just an opportunity to get a good education, work hard, support our families. And that's the message we ought to be talking about in South Texas and other parts of the country.